So for the first fireside chat of the day, we have Matthijs, who is the founder and CEO of QuantWare, which you described it to me as the Intel of quantum computing. So you're making the chips for other people's computers. And as we said in the slide, quantum computing is high risk, but potentially very high reward as an industry. So we're going to be talking about what the world with quantum computers could look like and how we get money and capital into those areas it needs to go. So thank you, Matthijs. First off, Thanks. Then, can you illustrate to us what this quantum world will look like?
Right. So I think maybe it's good to start with what the idea behind a quantum computer actually is. And at a really high level, when you zoom down long enough, the small elements in nature, like atoms or electrons, they follow the laws of quantum mechanics. And it turns out that normal computers can't really calculate, the properties of quantum mechanical systems. Now that sounds like a science experiment, but that has very, very big implications. That means that quantum mechanical systems are things like medicine or batteries or things like that. And that means that if you want to do, calculate optimal configurations of these things, you need a computer that uses quantum mechanics to calculate things. And so that is the reason that that we're building quantum computers, is that there's a gigantic host of problems, a set of problems that is extremely valuable.
Can you crystallize what some of those problems will be? You think some of the most exciting applications?
Right. So, the honest answer is we don't really fully know yet. That is actually a really deep scientific question. But like high over, you could imagine that it would be quantum problems themselves, right? So, like I said, calculating an optimal medicinal molecule or something. And maybe to give an intuition for that, like how powerful that is, if you have a state of n qubits, n being an arbitrary number, you need 2 to the power n numbers to write down that state. That means that if you have 2 qubits, well, you need 4 numbers, right? You can do that in your head. If you have 80 qubits, and we're nearly there, some American competitors are past that, you need more numbers than there are atoms in the universe. So that's a really big number that obviously doesn't fit in a normal computer. And so that is extremely powerful. And then there are other problems, like non-quantum problems. And I think the biggest one that we currently know of is that quantum computers will break encryption. Okay. Which means that none of your banking traffic or secure communications will be secure anymore in a couple decades. And that also, that again shows that's just one of the first applications we know of.
Do you think the general public is, because obviously some of this is quite technical, do you think the general public is aware of how big this shift will be, and the implications, as you said, could be quite personal in some ways?
Well, yes and no. So I think there are quite some nuances here. I think there's a group in the general public that thinks that quantum computers will speed up everything, and that is not true. Like 1 + 5, your normal computer is really fast at, and we're not going to be able to do that any quicker. But then like the breaking of encryption, that is a huge deal already, right? And that's a problem you need to solve today. And if you don't, it's basically Armageddon, because nothing will work anymore. So I think yes and no. I do think it's fair to say that the perhaps together with AI, this will be the most important invention of this century.
It's very exciting. And how does QuantWare specifically fit into this big picture?
Right. So we design and fabricate the processors of quantum computers. That in that sense, we're a little bit unique because there are few players in the world that can do that. They are mostly big American companies like Google and IBM. And all the other players that can do that, they make the whole quantum computer, right? They're vertically integrated. And so we only do the chip, and we're unique in that sense. And therefore, the parallel with Intel is quite good. Yeah. Because in semicon, the same thing happened, and where the first 20 years everyone made the whole computer, the mainframes back then. And then Intel was founded, and 10 years later, no one made their own chips anymore. And the reason for that is that if you make computer chips, that is a fixed cost business. So you need to buy one extremely expensive machine, and then whether you make 1 or 1,000 chips with that machine, that doesn't really matter, because the silicon that goes in that machine is almost free. And so if you make 1,000, you can be approximately 1,000 times more affordable than your competitor.
Okay,
that makes
interesting. And how, because quantum is kind of the epitome of something that is quite a long-term vision, but will be very impactful in that end. How do you, How do you talk to investors and ask them for money for something that is quite far off in terms of its big implication, and particularly in this moment now, which, as we all know, is the midst of a downturn? How do you get them to back something really long term?
Yeah, I think that's a super relevant question, especially now that the environment has changed so much. So I think in Europe it's still quite difficult to raise money for these kinds of propositions, where the potential payoff is very big. But also the time horizons and the amount of money that you need to get to market is large.
Yeah.
And so we really look for investors that follow that strategy. So in general, those are deep tech investors, preferably with a quantum background, that really that have very long horizons in their portfolio, and that are comfortable with that risk profile, basically.
Are you sensing an increase in investors with that view? Is it getting easier?
Yes, but not fast enough.
Okay.
And so that means that I think realistically for us, and statistically, this is still through, I think, across industries, not just quantum, we will probably need to raise money in the US at some point. And and I think that's a pity, because Europe has one of the strongest, technology bases, and also very strong talent pool. Like also in quantum, I think the TU Delft is one of the best institutes in the world at this period. And it would be a shame if all that potential, then the payoff of that potential goes to foreign investors. I think that would be a shame.
That's true. What do you think Europe, as both an investment community and a political entity, can do to kind of claw back some of the draw of America?
So I think there are a couple of things. I mean, the most obvious one is put more capital into the system, but that's hard to simply do. I think it's important that governments create an environment where it's clear that you're not just putting money into a bet, but that for the next 10 years that environment will be okay. And so I think quantum, that has been done reasonably well, including by the Dutch government, who've funded 650 million initiative by the Groeifonds called Quantum Delta NL, which means that for when an entity invests in our company, they know that for the next 10 years, the US government, the Dutch government will probably be supportive of our environment. I think initiatives like that are very important. And then I think it's important to foster some kind of ecosystem. I think there's really a flywheel effect that the US has, where you have founders that became billionaires that then reinvest in the ecosystem, and again are comfortable with these bets. And then I think a third important element as part of that, like in order to create that ecosystem, it needs to be much more acceptable that some of these bets will fail. Because clearly, let's say if you're a SaaS startup, then there might be some scenario where you cut a lot of costs and a lot of R&D, and you become profitable, and you'll get some mediocre outcome, but that doesn't mean going bankrupt. And when you do nuclear fusion or rockets or quantum computers, that mediocre outcome isn't really there, right? You go big or you go home. And I think a good example of that is Lightyear, for instance. And I think I think rather than thinking, oh well, a proposition like that fails, I think it's fantastic that these bold bets are being made. And we should have more of them.
So just for audience members, for Lightyear is a Dutch car company that was building a solar powered car, but went into bankruptcy. Just for context.
Yeah, exactly. So I think so. I'm not an expert on that cases, but I greatly admire a bet like that, and I think it's very important that we, if we want to build that ecosystem, that there are more bets like that, and that it's accepted that, probably the majority of them will fail, but the few that don't completely make up for it.
Yeah. I guess in a downturn, it's harder to get that acceptance of trial and error going. Last point before we go to audience questions, can you summarize for us what would be lost in terms of market potential and just like real world potential if Europe lets this industry head to America or abroad?
Do you mean the quantum computing industry?
Yeah.
So quantum is a strategic technology, and that's not just because of the breaking of encryption, but also of the fact that for certain problems you will have exponentially more compute power. And I think the closest analogy I can think of, but I think it's less powerful, is the internet revolution that Europe didn't win, or the computing revolution. I think the same is about to happen with AI, and it would be very bad if the same happened with quantum. I think that we cannot be reliant on foreign companies to give us these capabilities. And I think Europe needs to continue on the path they've chosen and invest heavily.
It's a good call to action. Does anyone have questions? We have a mic we can put to you if you do. If not, I have a few more. Put your hands up if you do. Great. Here's this mic we can throw at you. Sorry, I'm an enthusiastic thrower.
Yes, thank you, Matthijs. Very inspiring story. If there is one global challenge you want to solve with quantum, which big global challenge do you want to solve?
That's very. So what I want to solve are the obvious big challenges like climate change. But I think second part of that question is what can we solve? Because climate change is a near-term problem, and it will still take a while before quantum computers can tackle those big problems and then have an impact. So if quantum computers have impact by, let's say, 2035, then probably that's a bit late for climate change. But I think it's much more of a low-level general technology that will impact a lot of fields at the same time, and hopefully will make a lot of industries a lot better. And in that sense, the parallels with AI are obvious, right? That will have a very broad impact, not just a deep impact. And I think quantum is similar, if not just for the fact that probably quite a few AI algorithms will run, will be enhanced by quantum capabilities.
Do we have any other questions? I can throw you this mic. Oh, thank you. You're a tamer thrower. Great. There we go.
Does it work? Yes, perfect. In terms of the whole supply chain, value chain, what is the most valuable part in the Dutch industry on quantum technology or in the European industry, which you could use to have a strategic position in? Because there are many aspects in the whole quantum technology, in the whole supply chain, the same conductor industry, but also the applications, etc. Could you elaborate on that?
So, without I'm not just saying that because it's my company, but the chips are definitely one of the most strategic elements. And in that sense, it's a bit different than in the semiconductor industry, where clearly ASML is at a very big bottleneck. For us, the tools are less less complicated. You can buy those at different suppliers. And I think in quantum computing in general, there's quite a mature supply chain, believe it or not. I think one other bottleneck is the fridges that we use. So our chips only operate at 50 millikelvin, which is very cold, near absolute zero, coldest point in the universe. And those are made by quite a few companies, including a Dutch company. But there's one very dominant player from Finland called Blueforce, and they make nearly all of those. So I think that is a second choke point. But in general, the chips are, and that's also why only very few very big players can make those, and you can't buy them except for at QuantWare.
I had no idea about the fridges. There's so many parts of this industry that I have no clue about. It's fascinating. We're out of time. I'm sorry, it's a super quick chat. But will you be sticking around for a bit of the rest of the day so people could catch you and grill you on quantum computers?
Sorry, probably not. But
but they can contact you in some other way.
Yes, they can.
I'm sure you'd be happy to
contact
chat
me on
about
LinkedIn
quantum.
or something. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. So very interesting. Thanks very much.